Hey everybody, Chase Stein from Mixed West Media here. Now I'm coming fresh off of a feature film that shot the entirety of August. It was a period piece, had loads of cool cast in it. But what I'm here to do today is to talk about some of the things that I learned while on this set. It was my first major production that was shot right out here in the Midwest. I'm hoping that this video is kind of a good reflective tool for myself, but could also lend some insight to you or the fellow sound mixing community on what you can expect when sound mixing a feature film. Now I've got 7 lessons that I learned while mixing on a feature film. The first and most important lesson that I learned is be present for that location scout. Now, I didn't have the opportunity to be present for this location scout on this film. Everything kind of came together very last minute, and they just didn't include me. I would have preferred to go because pictures can't do a location justice in terms of audio. You need to be able to hear the space, notice any of the problems that might be occurring in that space, which allows you to organize and put a plan together to figure out how to overcome that particular problem. For instance, we were shooting in a lot of historical locations for this feature film, and one of the locations was a museum. They had a lot of furniture and artifacts in there that had to be maintained to the T, which also means that they had an industrial climate control system to maintain the proper temperature for all of those antiques and items that are in there. This particular unit was present in one of the rooms we filmed in, and I'm not joking, it spanned the entire top line of the wall, and we are not able to turn that off. It was very unfortunate. The actors actually had a difficult time acting past it because sometimes they were either whispering or delivering lines so low that the other talent couldn't hear them. We didn't have the time to set up sound blankets or whatnot in front of it. It would have taken all day, and we were only shooting that one day in that particular room. So we unfortunately just had to live with it and then let post sound take care of it, or an ADR track later. I never like doing ADR. I like getting the performance on the day, but sometimes the challenge is too great to overcome, and you just have to loop it back in post. The second lesson that I learned while on this feature was make friends with the costuming department. It is of major importance that you get ahead of the game and talk to your wardrobe department before shooting. That way you're able to get outfits, materials, and understand where you're going to be placing your lavalier microphone and the transmitter pack on that particular talent. Unfortunately, yes, on this particular film, costuming department was coming in clutch last minute. They were doing looks for extras, even talent that had speaking roles on the day. I wasn't really able to get any sort of references. And as this was a period piece, we had a lot of complex costumes. We're talking 3-piece suits. We're talking floor-length dresses with 2 layers of skirts underneath. It was a massive challenge to figure out how to mic these people properly. It was a huge shout out to our wardrobe department, which is Melanie and Tommy. They put together some amazing looks at the very last minute, but unfortunately the circumstances laid it down where I wasn't able to get the information that I needed to reliably get good sound within the first few days of shooting. I remember one particular costume was very difficult. It was one of our leads who happened to be wearing a 3-piece suit, but that particular character always wore an ascot on his neck, which draped over the front of his chest. I was really not able to get any good sound placing it under or around that chest area. We'll come back to how we solve that in the next point. The third lesson I learned on this particular movie was create a nice rapport with talent. You're going to be in close quarters with the performers every single day to get them mic'd up. So being pleasant, being communicative, and getting on their level is super important. I have experience with acting on camera. I have experience with being a camera operator, but in my sound mixing career, that's where I've learned to properly socialize with talent the best, because like I said, you're going to be in super close quarters when you're miking them. But you also need to realize that there is some talent that truly is antisocial. We had one particular talent on this film that was not wanting to be mic'd by me. They wanted me to pre-mic the outfit that they'd be wearing on the day. Now, there's a lot of minutia when it comes to doing that. Adding extra time at the beginning of a call sheet, which means more hours for me, which is something production generally doesn't like doing because that means they're possibly paying me more if they go over on overtime. Not knowing exactly how the costume is all gonna come together when it's finally on the actor. Sometimes you gotta do stuff you don't like. Luckily, we found a pretty easy solution by putting the lavalier on the actual lapel of their jacket, and that didn't cause too many problems, not to say none, but that relationship is important. Some of the actors are now really good friends of mine because of this relationship that I created with them. Jefferson White of Yellowstone fame, he was a character in this film. I cannot properly express to you how kind of a human being this man is. He knew about the sound department. He always had time to talk with anyone, regardless of their position in the crew. He was a joy to be around, and then when the cameras turned on and we said action, the switch flipped. He is a marvelous talent and was very knowledgeable about being mic'd because he had done it so much. There was a sequence where one of our actors, shout out to Andy, was being dunked in water, and I had to mic him up for that portion of it. So I had to already have that rapport to let him know we're gonna be using a waterproof mic, we're gonna be using a special placement on this and that to make sure we can still get the audio even though you're being briefly dunked underwater. The fourth lesson I learned while on this feature is talk to your director about who they want to yell for hold when sound gets in the way. We had a bunch of exteriors on this particular film, and there was a lot of helicopter noise, a lot of plane noise. At some point, there's even church bells ringing in the background, trains, everything you can imagine was being thrown at us. Now, I did not have a preliminary discussion of who was going to say hold when those sounds became too great and interfered with the scenes. I always recommend clarifying with your director, you hold that power. You're the one listening. You have the option to say, stop, this isn't going to work in the edit. We have to hold and wait for that sound to pass before we can continue, even if that means disrupting performances. There are some scenarios where maybe you're on a time frame schedule and you just have to roll through it. That's what tools like Isotope RX and audio restoration software are for. The fifth lesson I learned is kind of a funny one, and I recommend you buy a cheap set of IEMs for producers, anyone else to listen to the audio while you're filming. The reason I say this is interesting. Generally, I have a set of Sennheiser IEMs that I send a mix out to, and they sound great. However, a Sennheiser IEM pack is maybe $300 to $500 depending on the model that you get. We had 5 people who could get IEMs on this production. If I'm handing 5 of those out, that's somewhere between $2,000 to $2,500 you're just handing out to people on any given day. Yeah, not always gonna work. So I also have a set of 5 of these particular units called Silent PA. They're made by Voco Pro. They are about $95 per unit. They transmit a really great signal, and they transmit in the 900 megahertz spectrum. So these particular units saved me on this production. I am so sorry, Mikutsi. I'm gonna tell the story. Our director, who is a lovely gentleman, wonderful chap, really likes Sour Patch Kids. So much so that he couldn't be bothered to just take the package with him and put it in his pocket. No, he puts those gummies directly in his pocket. You know what else he puts in his pocket? His IEM pack. There was one day where he comes up to me and says, Chase, the IEM pack's not working. What's going on here? I'm like, no worries, Mikutsi. I'll get you a fresh pack here. I hand him the fresh unit, and I take his old unit, I turn it around, and I see there's some residue on the back of it. I open the battery compartment, and I see some gummy had got jammed into the IEM pack, which is not that great for me. So, have cheap IEMs. You don't know who's gonna be responsible. Like I said, the Silent PA Voco Pro system saved me. It sounds good in the ear. They are cheap, they are plastic, but you can put them in a covering. and you won't really have to worry about the price tag if one of them does break. The sixth important thing I learned on this film: timecode checks. You are responsible for making sure that the camera is in sync with the audio. Now, I use the D&D timecode system, and those things are rock solid. They sync up really fast, a lot of options, Bluetooth compatible, really great units. However, on the second to last day of filming, I had sunk them in the morning, or so I thought, and handed them out. Middle of the day comes around, we do a timecode check, and the camera unit is off. Unfortunately, that does mean that our DIT, Sean, big shout out, had to sync them manually in post with the scratch mic. You don't want to make your DIT mad. They're already putting in so much work for you to make sure that all of that media you're capturing is ready to go for the director to see, for the editor to see. Timecode check in the morning, after lunch, do it again. Make sure everything's in sync, and your DIT will love you for that. And the seventh and final most important lesson that I learned on this film: don't be afraid to say no. If something is going to compromise the quality of your work, you can say no. On this particular film, one day a line was read wrong and we didn't catch it until later in the shoot. The director asked me to do a quick wild session to capture the correct line with that particular actor. However, it hadn't been scheduled out by anybody. No one really took over that. And on the final day, the director said, "Hey, let's go get that wild line now." After a particularly heavy scene where actors needed a full body cleaning, and we were gonna go do it in the house at the base camp that they were getting cleaned up at. The base camp had 30 people in it. We had 15 minutes. I told the director, no, we were not going to get any sort of usable audio in an old creaky house with 30 people in it, where two grown men were getting a full body cleaning after a particular scene. It was just not gonna happen in that short of a time frame. I'm very sorry. Be apologetic, because fortunately that does mean they're gonna have to pay for an ADR session, but that's better than giving them audio that's not gonna work in the edit anyways. Don't feel like you are obligated to say yes to everything. If everything comes together and there's no other way to do it, go ahead and do your best. That's it for me. I had one of the best experiences I've had on a set doing this particular project. There were ups, there were downs, but I feel I came out of this project having learned more than I possibly could have on any other project I've done in my lifetime. And I'm really grateful to the talent. I want to give a huge shout out, not only to our director Makutsi, but Bruce Bales and the entire camera team. That's AP, Morgan, Ben. You all killed it. Massive shout out to my boom operator, Dylan Jacobson, and to the talent that really made this project worthwhile. We have, Mina, Jefferson, Tyler, Mickey, everybody who I got to interact with it was a pleasure to work with them. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Let me know any lessons you learned on one of your first features or big projects you worked on as a sound mixer. If you have any questions, go ahead and comment below. Thanks again. Peace.